Hey crafters, Big D here, and this week we're doing the second part of our ultimate kill team battle board.
Hello once again, my darlings. It is I, the Lady Dragon, have come to join you once again at the request of my darling husband, Big D. Last week we started on our ultimate kill team board with a Death World Forest. You watched us build the frame, put the foam in, and show you some fun tricks on how to get specific features. Apparently people really enjoyed that acetone thing. So did I. And don't let just water be the only thing you can think of. Trust me, there's a lot more fun uses that you can use it for. This week, we are going to finish detailing it. We've already primed it, as you saw us do at the end of last week. So this week, what we're going to be doing, we're going to go through, we're going to paint it, the ground cover, the water areas before, and then add flocking. Then we're going to add in the resin for the water before adding some clear Mod Podge to give it a wave or current-like effect. Once that's done, well, this board is just about done. Alright, crafters, let's hit the table.
So for the first part, we're going to have the Lady Dragon painting our waterways. She is actually a far more experienced painter than I am, so I'm just going to let her do what she does.
Alright, my lovelies, so just to let it be said, you can actually start painting at any point on the board you would want to. I personally want to start here. So this is where I'm going to start. The colors we're going to be using are a variety of purples, blues, some greens, and then we're going to dry brush the banks with a nice chocolate to kind of give it a water effect. By using different colors in which I'll be wet blending together to give it the looks of depth. For those of you who have never heard, who keep hearing the term wet blending but have no idea what it means, wet blending is basically somehow blending the paints together to give you a transitional effect while the paint is still wet. It's kind of fun. You've probably been doing it for a while and had no idea that's what it was called. So to start, we're going to use a little bit of this dark purple for the lowest points that we want it to be. So wherever it is going to be the darkest, you just put some of the dark color down. We're going to do just this little area right over here to start, and then you guys will see me work. And then a little bit of the brighter purple. It's going to move in here. And if you don't like the way it's coming out, don't forget, you can always go add a little bit more. Alright, and so that's all we're going to do. We're just going to go around doing this fading of effects into and out of the whole thing, and then once we're all done, I'm going to add a chocolate brown to the ridges with a nice little, basically dry brushing to bring out these lovely ridges and details that we have in here while still working with the blending.
Alright, crafters, so we sat there through most of it, lost a little power at the end there, but here we go. This is the river, at least the water portion of it, painted. Now, Lady Dragon is going to take some dark brown, a mud color basically, and work it up onto the banks, into the ground, and after she's got that transitioned up, I'm going to take over painting the rest of the area. So again, I'm just going to watch her transition up. And again, this is just another example of wet blending. It's just that we're using some of the base color that we painted it to begin with as part of our color. Alrighty then, crafters, we've got our browns nicely blended back. We've got this lovely illusion of depth with the water. The Lady Dragon, a very talented painter. I was so happy when she started doing this sort of stuff with me, because her talents, I've learned a lot from her. Big thing when you're doing crafting, look at other crafts, look at other ways things in your craft are used by other forms of art. You will learn wonderful techniques. That said, we're going to move forward. So we've got a brown blending back into the rest of the ground. Now a lot of it's going to be covered in flock, and we'll talk about flock in a bit. But I still want to do some modeling of the color across this brown base. So we're going to take some more of that same chocolate brown, along with some medium brown, some green, and some gray, and we're going to use sponges, and we're going to stipple it all over. So let me get my palette and the paints and the tray, and we're going to show you how we're going to do that. Alright, now with the sponging process, you can do this a couple of ways. You can use a synthetic sponge, but you just want to tear it so it's got nice rough, uneven edges. I prefer to use natural sponges. They've got a nice uneven stippling effect. It works wonderfully. If you can't get a hold of either, just using a paintbrush and just stippling, randomly turning it, the brush, and tapping in different areas will get you very similar to the same effect. So we're just going to take our palette. I've got some of that dark brown in there. Just going to put a little bit on there, not too much. Tap some of it out. You don't want to go crazy. And again, you're using a light hand with this. You're not trying to get full coverage. What you're trying to do is, again, put a bit of the color all over. So just start at the water's edge and work your way around. Alright, so we're going to take this dark brown and we're going to give the whole piece kind of a stippling with this. Then we're going to come back and we're going to do it with a medium brown, a green, and a gray. So we're going to continue on and we'll be back. And here we go. After some heavy sponging, we have got a beautiful kaleidoscope of color underneath of where we're going to be putting our flock. So we'll get a nice variation in tones and color for where we don't have complete solid and perfect coverage, which we don't exactly want. We want the ground to look natural and you don't have grass everywhere. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to detail is we're going to paint the rock feature that we put in the middle of this. We're going to start off by basing it with a dark gray. Then we're going to do an overbrush in a medium gray, and then do a final dry brushing in a very light gray. So let me get the paints. We're going to bring the camera in real tight and watch us do this detail work. Alright, so we're going to be painting this rock feature. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take a dark gray and we're just going to give the whole thing a nice coat of dark gray and then let it dry. So that big gray rock we selected in the middle of the feature, the dark gray didn't turn out really well. It was way too bright, so I've kind of had to rethink it. Now this is the first rule of working on a project. Don't be afraid to go back and reevaluate what you're doing with the project. So I went back, I mixed some dark gray, a little bit of brown, a little bit of green. I kind of re-gave it a new coat, and now I've highlighted it with a little bit of bright gray, and I'm just letting it dry, and I will eventually be doing some dry brushing and some washing to it, and we'll come back to that. But while we are waiting, you're going to need some sort of sculpting tool, because we are going to work with texture paste. Now you could use your own just plain texture paste. I'm actually using a pre-textured to give me the effect I'm looking for. It's called Strickland Mud from Citadel. You could just use regular texture paste with some sort of aggregate in it. I want to make a muddy path. This already is the color I want it to be, plus it ends up with a really nice texture. So normally this is used for like miniature bases and whatnot. What I'm going to do with it is we're going to make a path. So you're just going to take your tool and you just kind of want to draw with your tool where you want this path. I had thought about this already quite a bit. I'm going to put some in this depression to show where the mud's gathering up. But we're going to do a path. Alright, that should be good enough. So we're going to let that stuff dry, and when it's done, it'll look like a real sticky, icky mud. Remember when you're done with this stuff to take your sculpting tool and really thoroughly clean it off. If you don't, this stuff is incredibly sticky. There we go. All right. Gonna wait for this all to dry, and then we're gonna do some highlighting and washing on the rock, and then we're gonna get to flocking. Okay, we put that little bit of black wash on there, and that really did a good job adding texture. So now the last thing we're going to do to that hill is we are going to use a makeup brush, powder brush, we're going to dry brush with. So we just got a little bit of a light gray, almost a white on there, and we're just Deathwood Forest has a giant boulder in it. We're amazing. Alright. Now we have to wait for the mud to dry. So probably be a couple hours, potentially even waiting till the morning. And then we're going to start the flock. Before we do that, I'll pull aside the flock and we'll go over it all and see how it all looks. Alright crafters, let's talk about turf and details. Some people like making their own turf. There's a lot of videos on how to make their own turf. They can make their own blends and whatnot. I don't like the bother. I don't have the time or the bother. I don't like making stuff to make stuff. I just want to make the stuff. So, I'm a big fan of purchasing your turf and your details, and then using them with the different skills you have. Now, I'm very lucky. I grew up with a brother who was a model railroader, and he introduced me to the hobby, and I converted a lot of that skill into making my terrain. I am also very lucky that I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is headquarters to one of the largest model railroading manufacturers and distributors in the world. I'm not getting any type of compensation. I'm not getting anything from them, but Walthers.com, this is what they do. They figured out the detailing game. I mean, railroaders figured out the detailing game years, decades ago. So, this becomes easy for us. It's just a matter of picking what you want. Walthers is wonderful because they carry everything. They carry woodland scenics, they carry knock, they carry timberline scenery. I mean, if I want something, if I want anything, I can go there and walk in, because at their distribution headquarters, they also have a walk-in store where it's like a candy store for crafters like us. You want to detail something up, you got it. They also run sales all the time, and those sales work online too. So Walthers.com, great source for turf, details, all this kind of stuff. So, here's where we're at. There's a couple different kinds of turf. You got blended turf, which is like a fine powder. They also call it pollen. I think pollen's even a finer version of it. You've got medium coverage, medium turf, which is also Woodland Thieves calls it coarse turf. There's also a bigger grade called clump turf, which we're not going to be using any of that. But I mean, we've got different colors of turf we're going to be using, and you can get it in just about any color. We got a couple really great colors I want to use to bring things out, but other things also come in. You got this bushes, this is the really coarse stuff. This is actually like small pieces of foam. We'll be using this in a few places. This will look really good with other flock around it. We've got strew material brown. Basically, it's the fallen leaves. So we're just going to sprinkle this on stuff. So leaves, this is more like earth, so we're going to get this closer to the banks. Deadfall. Now these are dead trees and whatnot. These are treated a bit, so they're not going to rot on me, and they're nicely dried out and they're treated, so I can put these down and glue them down, and these are going to last for a very long good time. These are really great. They've got some really nice textured materials there, so we can get to that. We've also got natural colored lichen. Lichen is really good for placing it for small bushes and small shrubbery. So we've got a multitude of colors here. Now the big thing when you're laying flock, if you're laying flock on top of flock, you want to remember layers. So you want your fine flock lower with coarse on top of it, and sometimes if you put the coarse down, you want to go back with like a different color of the fine. You want to layer your colors and layer your textures. Now we're not going to go completely heavy, so there's going to be a huge thick layer of this on there. But we're going to put a large amount of coverage. And the reason with a couple other colors is we want to make it look very alien. So we're going to have some of this weird greenish blue and some purple and some orangey reds, along with the dark browns and greens and rich other colors, and then some dead things around, some dead leaves around where we're going to put bushes and whatnot. So we're gonna mix this up to really kind of add some depth. We're also going to add some water-worn rocks. Now, rocks are great. If you get natural rocks, the good thing about them is that you don't have to really paint them. You can just kind of layer them in places. We're going to be using some in the water for where there's been buildup and where people are walking across. As the Lady Dragon said, we're going to put some down where we think there'll be paths through the water. Polished rocks are good. The ones a little bit more edges are fine. As this is going to be underwater, that's going to all work out for us. So don't be afraid to stretch. Use stuff you've never used before. Experiment. You can't really mess up with this stuff. The worst you can do is, I don't like the way that looks, throw another different color on top of it. So we're going to get some Mod Podge, and we're going to use full strength Mod Podge, and we're going to get a stippling brush, and we're going to stipple on the areas, and we're going to do it in types at a time. So we're going to start off with more of our blended turf and our fine turf here, and some of the coarser colors here and there, and work our way around and add some colors and add some depth. So let's get the project back on the table, and let's start making this jungle come to life.
All 3, 2, 1. All right, crafters. We are going to start detailing. Now, before I put the block down, first thing we want to do is get those couple of river boulders we wanted in place and some of the deadfall. So this is pretty simple. I'm just going to pick out some stones that look good, and we're just going to kind of put them down, and once we have a generally good layout of what we want, I'm going to glue a couple in place. Alright, I think we have enough rocks and twigs, tree fall, and that'll work. Let's get working on where we're going to put our flock next. So we're going to start putting down some of the earth and burnt grass colors. So we're going to try them starting on these banks and working our way back. Alright, so we've got a couple spots here. We'll just go ahead and shaker some on. Now we're going to go around and add a few more spaces around the map and let that dry, and then we're going to shake it off, and then we're going to start with our next color. So again, don't be afraid to put a little extra glue on. Don't be afraid to shake her down there. Go crazy. It'll all come off in the end. It'll be fine. Alright, crafters. So you can see we've got our fine turf down. Now we're going to move up, and we're going to do some pieces in a coarser turf in a couple other colors. And we want to have some of these match right up to where we're at. And if we invade the other one a little bit, that's okay, because we want this all to nicely blend together. So we're going to do some alternating, some brighter green and some darker green, also out of our shaker cans, and just try and add some more greenery and life to this lush alien death world we've got going on. Now again, don't be afraid to just kind of go crazy and put stuff in a few places and bring that life out in your diorama here. So we're going to do some more across the board. Come back when we got it all dried and shaked off. Alright, crafters, so as you can see, we've got our dark green and mixed green splotches covering large portions of our terrain here. Next thing we're going to do is now start adding some of our alien colors. We're going to start adding just small little splotches here and there of orange, and then when we take that off, we're going to do some splotches of this bluish green. So a couple splotches of orange, clean it off. A couple splotches of green, clean it off. So we're going to start with the orange. And the big thing with this is a lot, or a little says a lot. This is not coming in a shaker can. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put down some splotches. And then we're just going to take this orange material So I'm going to apply this orange all over the board, and then we're going to shake off the excess material, and we'll come back. Alright, crafters, little splotches of orange everywhere. This is really starting to shape up like some alien world. So now we're going to put on this sageish green, this greenish blue foliage, but we're putting it on in lesser areas, and we're only putting on a little bit at a time. And we're going to go around, hit the rest of the glue spots, get a few more spots down, and then shake that off. Alright, crafters, we've got our sage green down. We've got the orange nicely sticking in place. What we've also done is we've taken a little bit of the runoff that normally between blends you'll mix them, you'll unmix them. You'll basically take this stuff and put it in the container that it belongs to. At the end, you're going to have a little bit of mixing at the end, no matter what you do. That little bit of mixing I took and scattered over the larger area of the map here, just to kind of add some interesting color and some blend effects across our terrain to show this cavalcade of colors exploding all over our map. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take that purple pollen and we are just going to gently sprinkle it over the map. We've got enough purple down to make this planet look alien.
And you're probably wondering why, well, you didn't add any glue. How are you going to glue that all down? Well, what we've got now is we're going to scenic glue everything in place. And because some of this material was so fine and little, we don't need to put glue underneath. We're just going to glue the whole thing down. And we're going to use scenic glue or flock glue. I use basically Mod Podge diluted 4 parts water to 1 part Mod Podge. And we're just going to spray the whole thing down and let it dry. Now we're just going to give it a few hours, let it all dry up, and then once it's all dry, we'll come back and we'll do the water effects on the ground here. Alright crafters, we have a really nice board ready to add some resin into these rivers. Now, I've used resin quite a bit in the past. This is the first time we're using it on the channel, so we're going to talk about this a bit. First off, I want to give a shout out to Peter Brown. He has actually a wood working channel, but he does a lot of work with resin, and he can explain a lot of the basics of resin and a lot of the understanding about resin on that channel. He does really great stuff, not particularly for our hobby, but again, like we said earlier, whenever you're working with something that is used in another art, look at the other arts that use it, how they use it, and you will learn more about your medium. So, Peter Brown here on YouTube, wonderful stuff. There's a lot of other terrain channels that will use it as well. So we're going to talk about what I do. First thing that I do is I make sure I go through wherever I'm going to be pouring my resin, and I make sure it's clear of any debris, anything I don't want in the water, because once that resin dries, it is done. It is not coming out of there. Now, I also have 3 cats. So I gotta look out for cat hair, I gotta look out for extra fuzz, I gotta look out for stuff. So, next thing, once you make sure that your area is clear and you got everything dammed and sealed, the way we built it, we did that. If you were doing an open-ended, you would want to use some type of dam on the side there. Luckily, we built this so we wouldn't have to worry about that in the future. We're gonna now use the casting resin. I'm using Casting Craft clear polyester casting resin. This is good stuff. I can get it at Michael's, pretty inexpensive. It is a 2-part, meaning you're putting the resin into a cup and then you're adding your catalyst into it. Make sure your measurements are very exact. It is important. We're also going to add a drop of green and a drop of brown, a single drop of acrylic ink into our resin. Now, I have a pre-measured cup. So, in following directions of this resin, I am taking 8 ounces of resin, and because I've got about a 1/2 inch pour in most areas, we took 6 drops of catalyst per ounce. We put 48 drops of catalyst in here. I put a couple drops of green and a couple drops of brown. I thought one would be enough, but I didn't think so. And now we want to just mix it for about a minute. And you want to be sure you're scraping the sides. And you want to work in a well-ventilated area because this stuff does smell. And after mixing it for about a minute, scraping your sides, we're now going to pour. You want to pour thin to avoid bubbles. And you want to make sure you're working in an area that is level. So it looks like I'm going to need to pour another 8 inches, or another 8 ounces. So let's mix that up and get that poured. 3 pours, 24 ounces of resin later, and we have a river. Alright, now what you want to do is you want to take something. This is hopefully mostly level. I mean, when you're doing it. Mine is mostly level. I have a fairly level area, nice level table. Everything's kind of set together. You want to take something, you want to cover this, and this is probably going to sit for 6 hours, 8 hours at least. Longer could be better. Overnight's not going to hurt it any. But let it sit. And when we're done, we'll be coming back to a nice finished Death World Forest battleboard. We will be back. So our resin is dry and it is rock hard, and this stuff is lovely. Now, I learned something from working with this resin. One of the things you need to make sure of when you're working with resin is read the directions and the suggested usages thoroughly. I learned that they suggest this is more of a casting resin, so it's going to separate from its mold. Meaning, when I was done casting it, it separated from the edges of some of the rivers here and there. Not that big a deal. The next step is going to take care of that. I just had to take a little bit of clear hot glue and run it into a couple of the spaces here and there to kind of get it to fill up the voids that were created. Again, not a huge deal. It'll be fine. It'll look great on the board, but sometimes you have to be able to shift and adjust with what you're doing. Know when you're working with resins, you want to follow the directions, and if need be, do smaller pours. If I had done this as a series of smaller pours, I probably wouldn't have had this situation. I was so anxious to get this done for y'all, I've got some gaps. The Lady Dragon here is going to fix that problem though. We're going to be using an age-old railroader technique where you take resin water and you cover it with a stippled gloss Mod Podge. So, Lady Dragon, have at it. He's just finishing up the last spots. Now remember, this is all going to dry clear. This white will go away. So when this is done, you're going to have a nice rippled effect on the water. This is it. When this dries up, we're going to come back, throw some figures on here, and show you what this new Death World Forest gaming table looks like. Alright, crafters, here we go. Finished board. We've got Bjorn's Ice Howlers moving forward on some nasty, vile Drukhari.
Really now? I can run circles around those wolves before they can pull their heads out of their asses.
As you can see, we don't have them painted yet, but we put a couple pieces of terrain just to kind of show you what this board can all handle. The waves came out great. The terrain's wonderful. This is colorful and packed with action, and when this thing is on the table and people are playing, this itself is a wow. This is epic gaming. This is an upgrade to the average game. Remember, guys, anyone can do this. This is simple tools. This is simple techniques and just a little bit of imagination.
And as I like to say, the only limit is your imagination.
So, I'm Big D.
I'm Lady Dragon.
Game on.